afternoon. I'm Regina Brown Wilson, Executive Director of California Black.
Good evening and welcome, or good afternoon, and welcome to the Prove It event. I am going to introduce our moderator, Miss Regina Wilson, and we are going to get started. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right, let's go.
Great. I'm Regina Brown Wilson, Executive Director of California Black Media, and I want to welcome everyone today to the Prove It Forum. Today's topic is about electric vehicles, the wave of the future. Thank you for tuning in to this important discussion that impacts our community. We hope you will leave more informed about electric vehicles, sustainable energy, and challenges presented to our community as a result of the governor's executive order N7920. For the next hour, we'll be here to talk to experts about environmental justice, transportation, and energy policies, the carbon and our carbon footprint. You may wonder, why should I care? Well, the simple answer is all of these topics will greatly impact our community. And if we're not at the table, you know the saying, we'll be on the menu. So I'd like to acknowledge our sponsor for today. It's the California Electric Transportation Coalition and ET community. And I also want to just give you a few housekeeping rules. If you're reviewing this or viewing this on YouTube or Facebook, please type into the comments. If you have questions that require follow-up, please email them to electrictranscommunity@gmail.com. That's electrictranscommunity@gmail.com. So first, I'm going to introduce our panelists, and I want them to take the time, no more than a minute, to really introduce themselves. So we'll just go in this order. We have Dr. Nadia Anderson, Jose Bodipo Mimba, Simeon Grant, Naila Pope Hardin, and Larissa M. Wells, who will introduce themselves and give us a little bit of, let us get to know who we're going to be talking to today.
So I'll kick it off. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nadia Anderson, and for my day job, I sit on the government affairs team for Cruise. Cruise is working to safely introduce a fully electric self-driving car service into the transportation mix. I am a mobility and transportation sort of expert. I've worked in the space for more than 10 to 15 years, and I'm currently living in the city of San Francisco, but I'm from the East Coast and sort of cut my teeth in politics in Washington, D.C., but I'm from Virginia. So a little bit about me. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Thank you. Jose?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jose Bodipo Memba. I'm the Director of Sustainable Communities for SMUD, and I also am the Chair for the Urban Land Institute here in Sacramento. Really, what we do with Sustainable Communities is we want to ensure that every community truly has an opportunity for the best quality of life, which includes the EV opportunity we're going to be talking about today. And I'm really excited to share about SMUD's 2030 Carbon Zero plan and vision to make sure that we're zero carbon as a region, which provides better health. And EV is a key component of that. And we're trying to do as much as we can to make sure that one, no one's left behind, and two, that everyone can participate in this EV future. So I'm really excited about the conversation to share some new information that's what SMUD's doing and to hear from our other partners making our communities better.
Great, thank you so much. Simeon.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Simeon Gant, and I'm the Executive Director and founder of Green Technical Education and Employment, and we essentially teach high school and college students about career opportunities in clean energy, energy efficiency, and sustainable living strategies. We really focus on bringing this sustainable living, kind of clean energy world to our young people, to give them a heads up and prepare them for the workforce that's coming in clean energy.
Great. Thanks so much, Simeon, and great to see you. Naila.
All right, thank you for having me. Naila Pope-Hardin. I am the Executive Director of Climate Plan. We are a statewide organization that has about 50 network partners that are regional and statewide based. Our goal is to make more equitable, sustainable policy in the realm of transportation, land use, housing, and climate change. Thank you.
Thanks. And our last panelist, Larissa. Larissa.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Larissa Wells. I am the Environmental Justice Chair for the NAACP, and I am also the Executive Director for Visions One, Equity and Policy Development.
Great. Thanks so much for the panelists for joining us today. And I can't wait until we dive into the discussion. But first, we have a very special guest joining us today. Egune Okuku with ETC. Can you tell us about the Prove It and its purpose?
Hi, yes, I would love to. So first and foremost, I would like to thank everyone for coming. For those of you who are not familiar with who I am, my name is Egune Okugo. I am ET Community's Office and Program Manager. ET Community is a 501c3 nonprofit, and our mission is to help communities most impacted by air pollution and economic disparity. We launched the Prove It campaign to outreach to these priority communities to help educate, inform, and essentially prove to the community why it is important to be a part of this transition and how it will affect us if we don't have a seat at the table. I hope today's forum is helpful. We have a wonderful group of people here joined today. And as stated earlier before, if you have any questions or want to know how you can help, please email us.
Great. Thank you. So, as we said earlier, Governor Newsom announced in September 2020 that he will more aggressively move the state further away from the reliance on climate change causing fuels while retaining and creating jobs and spurring economic growth. Executive Order N7920 requires the sale of all new passenger vehicles to be zero emissions by 2035, and additional measures to eliminate harmful emissions from the transportation sector. California will be leading the nation in this effort, joining 15 countries that have already committed to this phase out of gasoline-powered cars and using our market power to push zero-emission vehicle innovation and drive down the cost for everyone. Larissa, can you give us a brief overview or historical context of transportation policies in the United States so that we can kind of have this discussion in a synopsis so that we're able to have like a more informed discussion on this?
Yeah, I can. Thank you very much. My name is Larissa Wells, and I am, I forgot to mention this in the introduction, also an urban planner. So in saying this, my part that I work with are more of the social policy aspect of urban planning, along with the architectural. In terms of transportation, now, at the time, President Eisenhower decided that he was going to, we can get from one part of the country to the next part of the country faster if we were just to go ahead and put these freeways in here and these different modes of transportation. Well, and that's fine. And yes, we probably did need that. But here's the problem that has developed with that. So in the 30s, we had the redlining that began developing, and where some places were deemed more desirable to live in, and then there were some that were less desirable. The ones with the less desirable were marked in red. Okay, so that's the color. And if you're in the red, usually it's Black and brown people. Now, in saying that, I'm going to move it closer to today. So today, let's just take the Bay Area, for example. You have the Interstate 580. You also have 880, and then you have 980 for those that are familiar. Now, those that when you're coming across the maze, and you're coming from San Francisco, you're coming in from Berkeley, and you're going into Oakland. So you have one part that allows the trucks and other places other modes of transportation to go to, and that's 880. Okay, so and 580 is where the trucks are not allowed. Now, in saying that, if you were to look at a redlining map, I'm not sure if I'm able to share my screen, but if you look at a map and you just look at, let's just say 880, well, If you're going past East Oakland and the industrial complex, then you're going, that's the industrial complex. You'll see the Oakland Coliseum. I still call it the Oakland Coliseum. It is not the
Right.
Oracle, it's the Oakland Coliseum. Okay. It looked like a Coliseum. It's the Oakland
Right.
Coliseum. All right. So in saying that, all the trucks are there, all the black and brown people are there, and the trucks are coming through 980 to connect to 880. Well, the people in West Oakland, before it became gentrified, had the largest amount of asthma and respiratory and ailments and diseases. Now, the ones on 580, when there was white flight from the lower part of Oakland up into the hills, which still persists, that's where you will see all of the trees. And so those people fought not to have trucks to kill their children or to make their children sick. And so the trucks are not allowed up there. If they're up there, then they get a hefty fine. Move closer to Sacramento now. And then in Sacramento, you have a multitude of freeways. You have 580, you have 80, you have 99, you have all these places. And yes, we do need items to come in here for our essential needs. However, the problem with that is freeways are always running through black and brown neighborhoods. You will always find those people suffering from a multitude of ailments. So in saying that, instead of looking for government to always look for us, to help us, because they have their own agenda, then possibly we can do things in order to assist our own needs. And some of that is being able to come up off of the cars that have fuels. Because let me tell y'all something real quick. And y'all buy them cars and you know they don't pass smog. But because they're cheaper, we get them. And I understand that. But the problem is, in the long run, what's going to be more beneficial for you? Because it's not just about you, but it's about everybody around you. And that's what we have to say about freeways. So yeah, there's a lot of pollution in the trucks that are allowed through our neighborhoods. And that is where we can take control.
Well, thank you for giving us that brief history, because I think that that'll help set up the rest of this conversation. Although I think I have a lot of questions for you in terms of how we look at the freeways, how we get stuff. I used to hate big trucks. I still get nervous driving next to them. But then my husband reminded me, well, whenever you go into the Target the next time, or Walmart, or the grocery store the next time, you're mad that you don't have certain things. These trucks have to get those things there. So I've listened to that, and I've had to kind of come up with this, gosh, we have to kind of live together. But
yeah, kind of, sort of, but there's other ways around that. You know, we can actually utilize the railroad line as opposed to, and having things more local in terms of the trucks, but also the route of the trucks have to, the route for the trucks in West Oakland, they're going directly through the neighborhood. They should not be going directly through the neighborhood. They should stay as close to the tracks as possible, not emitting. Let me put it this way. If you are within 2.5 football fields of a freeway, you are at risk of a multitude of lead in the air, industrial emissions in the air, all kinds of gas emissions. So there are other ways in order to be sustainable without having trucks. Why is it necessary for trucks to go from one part of the country to the next part of the country when you could clearly put them on a train and have them go and then locally and would have a designated truck route where it does not inhibit the quality of life and sense of belonging for the people that live there? Because ultimately, if you're near pollution or you're near this type of things, yes, you are going to have a host of respiratory problems, but then it also is an economic downturn. So if you have all this pollution, there are no businesses that are really going to come and want to set up shop, if you will, in your neighborhood. Thus, we see, food deserts and all these other types of things. So these freeways make it's more than just the emissions as an air. It's also an economic issue.
Well, great. I think that sets us up. African Americans face significant challenges in automobile purchases in general, and challenges are increased when purchasing electric vehicles, including price discrimination, access, and availability. Given all of this, the issues related to EV transportation equity paints a picture that many policies will not address. Recent and emerging mobility options offer an immense opportunity to rectify the failed legacy of transportation policies and infrastructure network that has plagued the African American community for generations. Unfortunately, current policies have not adequately addressed systemic inequities that continue to plague our transportation system. Dr. Anderson, can you give us a definition of transportation equity? What does that look like?
Absolutely. So first, thank you for the question. I'm going to give you what's called the quick and dirty summary of a topic that is really big and heavy and dense. And the disclaimer I'm going to give you before jumping in that these are my thoughts as an academic or somebody who works in this space, as opposed to reflecting any of my day jobs and what I do to make a living. So at its core, transportation equity is focused on addressing how systemic racism shows up in the transportation sector. It could take the form of funding, it could take the form of projects, it could take the form of policy. But at its core, in my view, it has to first acknowledge that there was past harm that was done. It has to be the redistribution of resources and attention in some way, shape, or form. And also it needs to have an eye towards breaking down those systems and ways of operating that perpetuated the system and situation that we're currently in. Larissa talked about redlining. Redlining is one example. Also, that prime example when Eisenhower built the interstate system, he built it directly through Black and brown communities. Now, rather than focusing on what this looks like today, if we were to do projects focused and rooted in equity, what it would look like today is, rather than focusing attention on the downtown corridors, which are getting a lot of attention, you would redirect those resources to the marginalized communities who are literally cut off from access to downtown by the building of infrastructure, by the way that we route our buses and public transportation systems, and also by the modes of travel that we make available to downtown corridors, as opposed to what's available in our Black and brown communities, which are often located on the southeastern or southwestern tops of the city. Now, equity can take many forms. But again, as I mentioned, you have to redistribute resources in some way, shape, or form. And you also have to make a concerted effort to make up for those past harms that were done. Our business as usual approach is not equity at its core. And in some ways, for some people, and which is why this is a hard topic in conversation, is because it can feel unfair to certain groups who have benefited from the systems and structures that are currently in place. Now, when it comes to like electric vehicles and getting those vehicles that don't pollute in the ways that Larissa just described when they come through our communities, a good example of this would be the programs that the state of California currently has to offset the cost of EVs. So EVs and zero emission vehicles, their MSRPs are generally higher. And as you mentioned before, there are also hurdles when it comes to getting loans and being able to finance these cars, specifically for people who may not have all the resources at their disposal. So if you were to put an equity program in place that's focused on electric vehicles, you would have to target those rebates and programs directly to populations who are harmed. So Black and brown people would be the target of those programs, meaning that you would market directly to them, meaning that you would go to the places where we buy our vehicles and make sure that we have access to those programs. So that's a sort of high level summary of what transportation equity is and what it looks like and how it can show up in the transportation electrification space.
Well, Dr. Anderson, since I am like, so those are like music to my ears. I mean, I'm the advocate underneath California Black Media, 28 media outlets throughout the state that are Black owned. I think Tavis Smiley's station in LA is now Black owned and is just coming online. And so that's just music to my ears, that we need to make sure that we have advocates like you at the table, letting them know they have to market to our community. I'm not trying to be discouraging of this topic or electric vehicles. I do own one. But the reality is I know that my household just totally different than what I know the average is. And so I know that I'm blessed in terms of, being able to have a Tesla if that's what we wanted to do. But I also know that, I've always looked at this and saying, we make these grand claims like, yeah, we're going to just make everybody get rid of their gas cars. And I've always said, is Oprah going to jump out and start being like, you get a Tesla and you get a Tesla? Because this is a hard conversation to ask. And if you're not marketing to our community and educating them, nobody wants a car note. So most people don't want a car note. And if you're not, and I'm not, this is no dig on Prius owners. Our folks are like, I'm Cadillacing it out. This is what our community has been marketed. They market that to our community. So how do you see this working? Do you see this happening? Like when they change the income requirements, I want to say a couple years ago, in terms of those rebates, has that helped, get Black and brown communities, specifically Black communities, has that helped them say, yeah, I might go towards EVs? Or were they just like, you know what, we're not looking at this at all?
So I think the income adjustment was helpful, but it's not a silver bullet solution in no way, shape, or form. And that point that you mentioned is spot on. So if you market to us, you need to understand what it is that we want and create products that we need, because we are a good consuming base and that we are also loyal when we decide to purchase something. So if there's a real effort being made to bring us to the table, then create the products that we need, talk to us specifically, and figure out how to address our needs. And in addition to addressing our needs, it can't be a top-down approach. So you need to have somebody who either knows the community or is from the community at the table. You also need to reach out and see what the community needs and figure out how to meet that demand. And that's how you can transition us over. I think that piece you mentioned about having a car note is absolutely key, because studies upon studies show that having access to a vehicle is a pathway out of poverty or ability to change your socioeconomic status. And also when looking at cars may be the only asset that many people are able to own. So we're looking at this car for a number of things. So you need to also be able to design programs that address that and also be able to speak the language. An example would be a lot of people talk about EVs as having a lower total cost of ownership over the lifetime, which is true because electricity is cheaper than gas or than petroleum, per gallon or per kilowatt hour. However, when I purchased a car, I wasn't looking at the total ownership cost. I was looking at what is this going to cost me month to month. So if you're designing a program that's for me, address my month to month concerns. And so you telling me that there's a program out there based on a total ownership, that doesn't necessarily speak to me. So if you're really focusing on equity, you need to close that gap. You need to have direct access and understand the position and situation, and then design the program that's supposed to fix it.
Dr. Anderson, I'm happy that we have you there as an advocate. Man, you are like on fire for me. I love it. So, as California transitions to the zero emission vehicle state, the African American community will be disproportionately impacted. According to the Zebra.com, 19% of African Americans reported living in a household without a car. Researchers at UC Berkeley found in 2006, Black households were much less likely to own a car than white households, identifying a growing gap between car ownership in white and Black households that span income levels. Naila, let's talk about California's transportation infrastructure.
Yeah, I wanna root this conversation in why the governor's even pushing for electric vehicles, which is climate change. And the whole reason for the executive order is to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. What we know is in the state of California, 40% of the emissions are happening in the transportation sector. And we also know, because of everything that Larissa and Nadia, Dr. Nadia talked about before me, that Black and brown communities are the ones that are carrying the heaviest burden of pollution. And so electric vehicles are part of that solution. The less that we're using gases, smoke, or what is it called? The smog that's coming out of our tailpipes, the less we have to deal with that, the better for our communities. But I also want to frame it that electric vehicles are not just the only solution. What we need are people to drive less. And that's really the root of it. We need people driving less. So that means we need investments in businesses and jobs in our neighborhoods. So we can talk about electric vehicles because we need that, and that's going to really help us chip away at that 40% of emissions. But we also need to be making sure that when we're advocating for our communities, we're talking about, like, sure, maybe I don't need to get into a car to go to a grocery store to go to my job. How beautiful would that world be, where we live the same midtown, downtown experience other folks do, where we can stroll to the grocery store to pick up, oh, I forgot to get, some cheese. I need to walk to the store to get cheese. And we don't need electric vehicles to fill in those gaps. So that's 50% of the pie, if not more, but it's not the whole pie that we should be talking about. So the governor gave his executive order for electric vehicles. But the year before, he actually gave an executive order that's talking about redirecting funding. So we're looking at the whole transportation system, the whole infrastructure of transportation. So electric vehicles are great, but also, are there bike lanes? Is a community walkable? If we give everybody electric vehicles, we're just going to have to widen the freeways. Do we ride in freeways? How do we get all these people in cars and moving? There's a lot of different solutions just besides electric vehicles that I think a lot of folks are talking about. And there's a lot of advocacy around reshaping what our communities look like and what kind of resources we get to our communities.
Well, I think that the pandemic, if nothing else, showed us that, right? I believe I saw a couple of articles. I don't think that California Black Media wrote any, but I believe that LA Times, wrote a couple of articles about the smog and how when everybody was at home and nobody was on the roads, it was like this breathtaking thing for transportation. Do you think that is going to speed up that effort in having us really relook and rethink about this? Because, you're right. The bike lane thing, I hate cars and bikes. So I'm in that weird thing in downtown Sacramento that I'm always I'm going to hit somebody. And I'm so afraid. I'm freaked out about how that whole thing works. But do you think that the pandemic has put us in this place to have a real discussion that we'll be able to turn the corner in this conversation? It's not what people are making it out to be, that it's all about the cars. It's about reshaping allowing people to work from home that can work from home, putting those small
Mhm.
business, small grocery store markets maybe in community where you can walk to. Is that, do you see that as being something that right now that's realistic and that can happen by 2020, 2035?
100%. Honestly, the pandemic changed the conversation in many ways because you had people who were living in really dense communities on top of each other that had enough income to move out. And so now we're figuring, okay, if you worked in the Bay Area, but when the pandemic hit, you bought some land a little further out, now are you going to have to drive in? And are we increasing the amount of cars on the road? And how long cars are staying on the road? But also, I think a lot of people realize that we need more resources at our fingertips that are accessible to folks. And so the conversation is shifting where I think there's a lot more awareness, but in a lot of ways, the problem has actually gotten a lot more impacted because people are spreading out and people are looking at reshaping like where they live compared to their job fit. So I think there's a lot. I can't stress enough how much room there is to really kind of reimagine and advocate for the communities that we want to live in.
Yeah, I for one work from home. I'm a fan from not having to go places. I love Zoom. I mean, I'm Zoom fatigued, but at the same
Mhm.
time, I love the fact that from a reporting standpoint and being a small nonprofit that is reporting around the state, people putting things on Zoom and that kind of stuff or Facebook Living allows us to be able to tell different stories and have access to things we didn't have if we, just couldn't get in the car and hop and go someplace. So
Mhm.
some of the stuff you have to be there for, but for the most part, I think you're right on point with that. So I know that SMUD has several programs that support social well-being, healthy environments, prosperous economies, mobility, clean energy solution. Jose, can you talk about these programs and how SMUD is working to reduce carbon footprint?
Thanks, Regina. I'm not sure if I have enough time because there's so many things we're involved in that space. Because really, with our CEO, Paul Lau, we've really turned up our energy, no pun intended, about zero carbon. Because the reality is it's impacting poor people the most, people of color the most, Black people the most, based off all the information we heard before in terms of homes and proximity, what have you. And we want to make sure that everybody can be a part of the zero carbon economy. So we've made a pledge, a 2030 carbon zero pledge. So 5 years more aggressive than the state of California in terms of our operations of having zero carbon emissions as a part of SMUD's operations. But on top of that, we have a number of programs in place for our customers so that, again, folks can buy in and adopt. So as a part of that 2030 plan, we also have our sustainable communities program that I'm running at this point, but we run it in partnership with over 130 nonprofit partners. Because as Dr. Anderson said before, it's about getting buy-in at the community level. So we're trying to make sure we can educate those partners, everyone from the Urban League to all the chambers of commerce to folks who are on the ground that a lot of those nonprofits that folks don't know about. And that's bringing in test drive opportunities so folks can learn the technology, get comfortable with the technology. Because when we talked about Cadillacs beforehand, I think the other speaker said, all those vehicles are going to be transitioning to EV. So learning how to use them and not be afraid of them and realize that not every EV is a Tesla. We have folks that are part of our team that are doing that on the ground. We can't wait now that COVID is slowly starting to dissipate to get in front of our customers and our partners. We have amazing programs related to building weatherization, home weatherization to reduce costs. And our EAPR program is our income assistance program for our customers can reduce that energy bill rate. And that also provides incentives and rebates for home electrification, for EV charger installation. But then another key component is all the new jobs that are going to be generated by this transition. So we're investing real significant level for workforce development. We're working with folks like the Urban League, Asian Resources, La Familia, doing training programs to get folks to learn how to do EV installs, because that's where we're gonna need all those chargers all throughout our county to be able to charge those EVs based on the 2035 order. Let's make sure that we're having our repair shops that are prepared to actually gain income from that. So we actually have over 97 graduates just from this year alone through our partnership, our Energy Career Pathways partnership, of which Dusty Baker of baseball fame is a big key contributor, where folks from Del Paso Heights, folks from Mack Road are all involved in learning how to do those installs, solar installs and EV installs. I'm sorry, I'm so excited because there's so many programs in place that we're a part of, but it's also in partnership with folks who are on this call, including someone who you're going to hear from later, Simeon Gant. He and his Green Tech team are working on a mobility hub in Del Paso Heights where the students are not just learning about EVs, but they're building a hub which is going to actually house electric vehicles for the community use. We're glad to be a part of that as well. And then last one, I would say there's a program called Clean Cars for All that is reducing the cost, actually can give up to $9,500 for individuals to trade in their vehicle that's a gas-powered vehicle for for incentives towards buying an EV. So that's just a snippet, but our 2030 plan is really getting involved everyone here and getting folks involved.
So I'm so excited to hear about the programs that you have. Now I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit. So what happens with all the batteries? So once we have it, I know that and maybe my ignorance of just understanding the storage issue.
Right.
Can you speak to like what's going to happen? Are we foreseeing what we're going to do with this, the batteries? Obviously batteries just go away. Do they recharge? Is there we're sending them to Mars? Is Elon Musk going to put them out there and put them to Mars? What happens with that?
Well, I think the big part of our 2030 plan is we're investing a lot of research and development time into battery storage technology. So I think one of the first things that is exciting is stuff like vehicle to grid technology, where I think you've seen the new Ford F-150 is going to be all electric. It'll have the capacity to actually power your house if we have an outage of some sort. Those are exciting. Yeah. But then as a part of that research, we're taking a look at how we can do a better job of recycling and handling battery storage as well. The reality is the technology is moving fast, and SMUD is doubling down its investment to make sure that there's no negative repercussions on communities. Because I know historically, all of those negative storage impacts have gone into our community. And so we're trying to make sure, and we're working with the Chambers of Commerce, with the Cesar Davis Gawaians at the Black Chamber, with Kathy Rodriguez at the Hispanic Chamber, to make sure, hey, how do we make sure we can create businesses that result in safe neighborhoods and jobs that can provide upward mobility? So I'm excited about that technology piece, and that's why it's a multi-year plan, because some of that stuff hasn't been created yet, but we're right there at the front. We're going to be the first utility in the country to do that, and that's because of the great collaboration of folks like yourself.
Great. Well, according to the California Energy Commission report on EV charging infrastructure, there are more than 70,000 public and shared private chargers available across the state. This report finds that the additional 123,000 chargers are planned through the state through grants approved by utility investments and settlement agreements, bringing that total to 193,000 chargers. To meet the 2025 goal of 250,000 public and shared chargers, the state will need about 57,000 more than they're already installed or planned. Modeling results in a report project that the state will need nearly 1.2 million public and shared private chargers in 2030 to support the number of light-duty vehicles needed to achieve the goals in the Executive Order N7920. Simeon Gant, why won't you talk about this? I think in the context of workforce development, we've seen all the great work you're doing with students. I mean, you're bringing back career technical education when everybody else was throwing stuff away. You're making sure that people can work with their hands. Like, I'm super excited because I want my son to be able to do these things. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm looking at housing costs and I'm saying to myself, you learn how to build it. I need you to learn, I need to learn how to build it ourselves. We need to know how to do this. So Simeon, tell me what's going on in that space in the context of workforce development.
I'm really loving this conversation. I'm history buff because our history has been so strained, and I just love the redlining conversation and the transportation conversation. And I mean, it's exciting time for us to really kind of jump in and really not be late, right? That's been my whole thing about this whole movement, is us not being late. But I'll come back to that. I'll just start off by saying, in the last month, Green Tech just hired 2 19-year-olds to work on the construction site for the Green Tech Zero Emissions Mobility Hub. One very sharp young man. He's kind of in this inventive mind, wants to be an entrepreneur. He knows he has to kind of learn some things. We've got him on the construction site. Another one, formerly incarcerated, has had some troubles, but now he's on the right path. We got him on the construction site, helping to actually build out this mobility hub, install electric chargers. We've also hired 2 drivers who are driving our alternative fuel vehicle, or our hydrogen fuel cell cars that we have right now. We have 4 administrators that we've hired, 3 trainers that we've hired. We now need security to hire. We need people to do maintenance both on the property that we're building. We need people to do maintenance on the vehicles, not just the engine, but just kind of keep it clean. One of the students said he wants to start his own detail company to help us keep the vehicles clean. Toyota donated to our nonprofit 8 hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, and imagine trying to keep those clean. It's crazy, right? And we need to hire some dispatchers. These are jobs. These are viable jobs, right? They're kind of the low-hanging fruit jobs, but there's jobs at all levels of this movement. In 2008, I started Green Tech. I started writing about it after Assembly Bill 32, the Global Warming Solutions Act of 2006 came out. And at the time, I had been bouncing around from job to job, and I got an epiphany, right? People looking for work. We were in a recession in 2008, and some of our people would approach me about, find a job in the newspaper, and I thought that's crazy. People aren't looking for jobs in the newspaper anymore, and it bothered me, right? And I thought, not only are we behind on just how to kind of stay ahead of what's happening, but with this new mantra of reducing greenhouse emissions and trying to create a healthier environment, the state of California says we have to redevelop our infrastructure. And that to me was like a light bulb, right? That means a lot of construction jobs, a lot of energy jobs. A lot of things are changing. We're not building the buildings the same way we used to build them. And that's how I would go in talking to our young people at the Alpha Academy mentoring program. I said, do you know what a green building is? Do you know what a carbon footprint is? Do you know what LEED certification is? Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And so we would go dive real deep into what these new vocabulary words are. I basically had a school. Green Tech is a school to introduce our folks to this new movement. And what I try to remind people that green jobs are traditional jobs with new principles. Green Tech has 5 elements. We introduce our young people to construction, transportation, utility jobs, manufacturing, and overall environmental management. And so we're talking specifically about EV. I could go on, like Jose mentioned, we can go on and on and on. So I'll kind of focus on the electric vehicle movement. Green Tech working with the Sacramento Air Quality Management District, California Air Resources Board, and SMUD. Thank you, SMUD. We are now building a zero emissions mobility hub in Del Paso Heights, a frontline, low income, and what policymakers are calling disadvantaged community. We're building a hub there to have 8 hydrogen fuel cell cars, 4 electric vehicles, an electric shuttle in that community. And the goal there is to use these zero emissions vehicles and pick up people in the community and take them where they need to go. Because as there was mentioned here earlier, many of us don't even have a vehicle, or many of us, driver's license is expired or is no longer good or used. Hell, we can't even get it smog, as mentioned before, right? And we shouldn't, right? We need to get those cars off the road, what they call them ICE, internal combustion vehicles. And I recognize that these new vehicles are expensive, but the the automakers also realize that they're going to have to make them inexpensive and affordable, and that's what they're doing right now. And if the governor is saying, well, he has this edict or that we've got to make this change, the car makers, again, all this has been mentioned here, the car makers they've already been moving into that change. So it's coming, and my whole goal has been able to just try to keep our people ahead of the game, as part of the game, and in the game.
So one of the things that you mentioned, I heard some of the key people that you have, that you're working with. Where does workforce development fit into this? I was on a recent workforce development meeting at the state level. It seemed like they were setting their priorities for, I think, the next couple of years. But I don't know that I heard this in workforce development conversation.
Yeah, honestly, the government, they're still trying to figure it out. I mean, again,
okay. Not throwing
I
anybody under the bus. Not throwing anybody under the bus.
I'll try not to, but it's going to be hard. No, it's because I sat at the table again in 2008, and at that time, they told me very specifically, there's no funding for training, workforce training, and there's no funding for youth. They told me that in 2008. Moving forward, now they're having more conversations about how to fix that, right? And they still haven't figured it out. I'll tell you that the key is the training piece. And the tough news about that is when you bring people in for training, that there has to be a job at the other side. And while I would say that there are jobs on the other side, there just needs to be a focus and understanding that first you need the foundation. If you're bringing in high school students and even college students for that matter, they first need to learn work ethic or the basics. What we've been doing is giving them OSHA 10 or safety certifications as a first step before they can even get a job, right? But a lot of folks are like, there's no job on the other side of it. And when in reality, there are jobs on the other side, but it has to be a real pathway and partnerships to make that happen.
And do you also think maybe that they think that there's no jobs on the other side because there's another key component that I felt like was critically missing is investing in our communication infrastructure to make sure, meaning obviously, you know me, I'm a buff at making sure, but we wouldn't be having this dialogue today, right? If it wasn't for the communication of being able to take this information, put it in bite size so people can understand, and then making sure that they know about the opportunities. It just sounds like to me, a lot of times our community doesn't know about the opportunities. They need the training, but then they need the information as well. So do you see that kind of playing into that at all?
Most definitely. You know me, as a former journalist, Regina, I'm with you. Our community, we always find out about it too late. It's already, the train has left by the time we find out. And so we do need to find ways to make sure that and I say, those who are putting out the funds, those who are putting out the information, we need to make sure that they're getting it to our community as well. And the work that you're doing is really, I think that's part of the answer, is get that information out to us because I know you're covering all of California in our communities, but they just, our government and those who are putting out the grants, they just have to try a little bit harder, in getting the information to us before it's too late. I mean, I get sent grant opportunities all the time, and we only have a week to write the grant.
Right.
And that's ridiculous.
Well, what you're finding I think is funny is I think I just dubbed this now since we're right on the eve of Juneteenth. I always say, I've started saying now, stop Juneteenthing our community.
It is.
Right? Just stop Juneteenthing our community. So anyway, well, given all what we heard today, I think I want to bring everybody back up. I want to look at, from each of you, what does implementation look like for the executive order? And what does that look like for African Americans as of today? And anyone can jump into that and start.
I'll jump in and start by, I think that what we're doing at Green Tech is a good start. I found a corner. I literally just found an empty corner in the hood and said, wow, this would be a nice place for a gas station. But we're not doing gas. So let's put electric charging stations here so that our community could take advantage of what's coming. And people kept coming to me, well, folks in the hood, they don't have electric cars. And I'm like, not today, but shouldn't we be ahead of the curve? Because it's coming. And I think there's communities all across this whole state that need these mobility hubs and opportunities and early innovative technology in our neighborhoods. And right now it's coming from the government. There's foundations who's also giving money, and we have to be hyper focused and saying, hey, we need it just as much, if not even more, than some of these affluent neighborhoods. Hook us up.
Right.
So to build on that point, implementation has to look like us at the table advocating on behalf of our communities while these programs and policies are being formulated in support of the governor's executive order. It means us also branching out beyond the traditional forms and ways that we engage and finding where the money is and also where the power lies and making sure that we're there. To go back to what Regina was alluding to, we're going to be at the table on the menu or under the table begging for scraps. And so let's make sure that we are ahead of the curve and able to totally take advantage of what's about to happen.
Like you said, Nadia, I want to add on that forums like this are very helpful to reach out to our community, because it's more than just building a charging station. We have to now adapt to the whole style. It doesn't take 5 minutes to charge a car, but it does take 5 minutes to fill up a tank. So we need to educate our community on, the reason why they're putting charging stations at grocery stores, because while you're shopping, your car can charge, and how that can be helpful, or how if you have it in your house, like you can store it and you can even get paid for having an electric vehicle in your space. So yeah, things like this and bringing people like this together also is very helpful to help our community.
I like to say the one thing and the one thing for certain and two things for sure is that government entities are not going to voluntarily come out and give the information. It's just, that's just not how they work. The community engagement piece is me coming from an urban planner point of view is no, and departments do not speak with each other. So in saying that, since there is such a disconnect there, let there be a reconnect with us. And in terms of the information that is, that has to be given, I am very appreciative to hear that it is at the high school level as well, because that is one of the things that I have done is teach urban design at the high school levels is important, but not only important for them, but we have to honestly go into the environment. There is a huge digital divide between our old, between baby boomers and even Generation X, I guess that's what they call it. They just kill me with all these different labels and whatnot. But what I will say is, they just doing too much with that. But what I will say is this: with those that are, let's say, 45 years, 50 years older, those that are younger can teach the ones that are older in order to learn how to do this digital thing. But a lot of them say, we don't want to do that. Okay, we ain't got time to be sitting here learning on computers. We find just the way we are. Okay, then what do we do in terms of that and going into the community and being able to speak to them, give them government information on a boot level platter, if that makes any sense. Okay, so let me just say right now, want to work with everybody I see on this panel. Period, case closed. So if you need me to do something, to go out to speak, you can't do it, then I'll do it. Okay, so that is what I'm extending, because we just can't be separate anymore. We can say all we want to on these meetings, but when we hang up, what are we going to do? And so what I'm saying again, I can't say it enough. I'm here. Use me, because that's what we're here for. And I will take it to wherever it is we got to take it, so that we will have that seat at the table and not collecting those scraps. We're going to be the eagles and not the pigeons. And that's it. And that's all.
Larissa?
What did the church say?
Thank you so much. I love it. I think you've spoken. You basically have spoken and told us what we're getting ready to do. I love it. Nadia?
I said, Larissa, I want to call you on that. So on Monday, we're making that happen. Naila knows I'm not afraid of making a phone call, because the reality is we have to work together to make this happen. When we talk about the jobs that are out there right now, the skill sets that are needed, like you said, the STEM education piece from implementation, We have to start at the school level and get folks ready. And I shared with the team here on the board, and I'm happy to share with anybody who's watching. We have a resource priorities map that we put together at SMUD, where the whole goal is to share the information and the data. So you realize, wow, I live in a neighborhood where there's some air quality issues and there's a food desert, but there's opportunities to create those hubs where these EV locations can be. The one last thing I would say is there's this big innovation hub that's coming to our region called the California Mobility Center, where the center of all new technology related to not just EVs, but future mobility is in Sacramento. We have to be not just a part of it, we have to be leading it in our community. Yes. We use that map actually to locate it in an area that is, as Simeon said, disadvantaged by government standards. So how do we make sure we work together? I'll put it out there. Cell phone, email, what have you. Let's work together. SMUD wants to make
smoke
sure
signals.
This region.
Oh, no smoke signals. No smoke signals. Sorry.
Yeah, air quality. Sorry, Nakia. I apologize for cutting you off if I did.
No smoke signals.
So anybody else want to look at what does implementation look like today, and where, I think one of those things that I would also love for somebody to maybe address, what departments should we be looking at? Like, where are some of these at, so that, like Dr. Anderson said, we have to be at the table, but if we don't ever get the notice to know where to be, where, and so what does that look like? So tell us, like, do we have to go to Air Resources Board? Where are these conversations happening?
Definitely at the Air Resources Board. But before we wrap up, I do want to just remind us all that we're doing this, that the government is doing this, and we're doing this because of health. This is a health issue, right? We got asthma in our community larger than anybody. And so we're going to reduce the carbon emissions and the greenhouse gases and the toxic emissions if we get these ICE cars, these regular combustion engine cars, off the road. And yes, Regina, we have to be at the CARB, California Air Resources Board. We have to be at Air Quality Management District boards. And they're asking for us to come to the table. They're asking for input from us. And we just have to be there.
But does the invitation get lost in the mail?
Commission.
This is my little snide remark. Is the invitation being lost in the mail? Because I've seen no public notice on these things.
Oh, it's lost. It's definitely lost in the mail. Yep. No doubt.
Stop it. It was never sent. So anyway.
Well, so I have to tell you,
part of this is truth telling.
It's hard to be the only black at the table, and I'm sure all of you've been there. We're the only black person at the table, and they'll tell us, we want you guys at the table. And so, but getting us at the table, especially on this particular issue, it's nothing that we grow up thinking about or being told we got to do. We should think about. We're usually told be a doctor, be a lawyer. We're not told to go talk about the environment. So we don't show up to these tables.
Well, let me also say this really quickly because I'm looking at the time, but let me also say this, that, okay, so young people do not even know that we even exist, that this exists, that, these type of jobs are jobs, that they honestly do have power to change things. It's always the young people. We know that from the civil rights movement. We know that from today. They on fire right now. So we need to utilize their fireness, okay, and move on. But I'm also going to say this lastly, is when I was in college, and I went back to college late, and my major was urban studies and planning. And out of a class of 70, I was the only one the entire time. And it's still that way today as I go to different environmental departments for different universities. They don't know. So again, we have to be boots on the ground. So I'm saying again, I'm the boot on the ground.
So I would just say at the table piece, let's not wait for the invite. Let's go to the table. Let's bring our own Tupperware with us and make sure we're ready to take something home. Because the reality is these processes are going through a regular process, but we have to engage early with our ideas, our innovative concepts to set the table, literally, to make sure that we're driving the car in the direction we want to go. So I would just encourage us to collaborate and come up with great ideas and take those to the leaders that we have. because there's an incentive for our region when it's all said and done. And I know there's folks here on this panel that are doing that and driving it. Naila has been doing it for the city. The city is moving in the right direction because of the work that she's doing. So I would say, let's not wait. Let's just bring our Tupperware and go.
Yeah, and I'll just throw in, it's every table too. When we talk about transportation, I mean, like, Simeon, it's a health issue, right? We're talking about getting people places. We're talking about jobs. We're talking about investment. We're talking about making sure people have access to, like, it's every table that we can be driving this conversation at. And it's a holistic approach to don't just throw a bunch of EV vehicles in the hood and give us 1 or 2 charging stations and walk away. We can't let that happen. So we need to be at every table talking about this everywhere we can.
Well, listen, if we can't come through the front door, then we just gonna have to kick in the back. How about that?
Well, I love it. I really enjoyed this discussion. You guys have made EV and talking about EV so exciting for me. And, given all that, we know that's going on, and I know that we're coming to a close of our time together, I wanted you guys to share some last minute thoughts, something that we can, something that our viewers can take away. And I, once again, if it's recapping something that they should really take home from this, tell us what that would be. I know it's all of it. I know you just put it in the lunch bag and just take it all.
I say go green. And go green, and green means a lot of things, right? At least for me, 2 things, right? Go green for a healthier environment, healthy, and 2, there's money in it. Green is money, right? And so and that's resources for our community, but it's a health thing for me.
I would say, lastly, as everybody mentioned, it's a comprehensive approach. We need to be at all tables. We also need to engage and inspire the next generation and the youth. And I think we also need to be flexible and comfortable with the fact that if we want a new outcome, we're going to have to move and do things that we haven't done before. And it's going to look really different. It's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable in our communities as well. But if the goal is to make sure that we're a part of this next revolution, we have to push.
I'll hop on right at the end of that, because what I have to say is real similar. What's really at the heart of this conversation is we're talking about reshaping the way that we get places. And I think we can there's a lot of opportunity there. And so we just have to really think through, how we want our communities to look moving forward.
And I'm going to say, back in the 20s, it looked different. The 40s looked different. And this is just called evolution. And, when we used to watch the Jetsons back in the day, we didn't know how true that really was. But, people perish because of a lack of knowledge. And so in saying this, let me be the one. Y'all going to see me real soon. Okay? Because I'm coming to get a knowledge. I'm serious.
Who else hasn't left us with a nugget of Jim? Jose?
I think I'm the last one, or Jose,
okay.
Yeah.
I would just say that despite popular belief, going green, going carbon zero is good for our community, but we have to do it right. There's a lot of fears that this is going to create gentrification, what have you. But if we do it right, if we do it together, and if we're at the table, this is going to allow our kids to live longer, live healthier, study better, grow better. Yeah. So this is something that has to be a priority. But then we at the agency level have to understand the other priorities too, to make sure that we move along together.
This is inclusion.
Yeah. And to piggyback, I think I'm the last speaker. I just want to end with the cliche saying that sharing is caring. So the more we share this information, the better we'll care for our world and our air and our communities. Thank you, Regina, for hosting today.
Oh, no. Thank you for allowing me to learn from you guys, to ask questions, to be kind of silly too. I thank you all. This has been a really fun discussion. Normally I don't do these hostings, but I've actually started becoming accustomed to them. So maybe I'm thinking I'm a little new Oprah. Just kidding. We hope that we hope that our audience has a better understanding of the energy and transportation policies and how it impacts the community. I want to thank all of our panelists and our audience for tuning in today. We will see you soon, and I hope that everyone has a great day.